Matthew Hale stopped praying on a Tuesday afternoon. There was nothing dramatic about it, no anger, no shouting, no tears. He simply closed the Bible, rested his palm on the cover for a moment, and realized he felt absolutely nothing. The house was quiet, in the way only empty houses can be. Too quiet, as if sound itself had learned to avoid the place. Sunlight entered through the living room window and settled on the dust in the air, turning it into something almost beautiful. The clock on the wall ticked with exaggerated patience, each second marking time for no one. Matthew remained seated at the dining table, the Bible still in front of him, open to the Psalms. The words stared back at him, familiar and distant at the same time, like the face of someone he used to know intimately but could no longer recognize. He waited for conviction, for sorrow, for guilt, for God. Nothing came. That was the moment he understood, not with fear, but with a quiet, unsettling clarity, that something essential inside him had gone silent. 3 weeks earlier, the chair across from him had never been empty. Anna used to sit there every morning, legs tucked beneath her, coffee cooling untouched as she read emails she pretended not to care about. She had a habit of humming without noticing, fragments of hymns she learned as a child, melodies without full lyrics, faith reduced to muscle memory. Matthew noticed the absence everywhere now. In the uneven wear of the floor, in the second toothbrush he hadn't thrown away, in the faint indentation on the pillow beside his. He moved through the days as though performing tasks someone else had assigned him. Shower, dress, eat something, answer messages, nod when spoken to. He did not cry often, not because he was strong, but because grief had taken a heavier form. It had settled into him like lead. People had warned him about grief. They talked about waves, about storms, about sudden breakdowns in grocery stores. What no one had prepared him for was the silence, the unbearable stillness where prayers once lived. On Sunday morning, Matthew went to church out of habit. He arrived late and left early, choosing a seat near the back, close to the exit. The songs passed over him like wind over stone. The words were familiar, too familiar. And that familiarity irritated him. He knew exactly when the chorus would swell, when the music would soften, when the pastor would pause for effect. He knew all of it, and yet none of it reached him. When the congregation bowed their heads, Matthew kept his eyes open. He stared at the wooden cross behind the pulpit, noticing the small crack near the base he had never seen before. Did it always look that fragile, he wondered. The pastor spoke about hope, about God's faithfulness in suffering, about trust that transcends understanding. Matthew felt something stir, not comfort, but resistance. A thought formed in his mind, uninvited and unwelcome. Trust is easy when nothing has been taken from you. The service ended. People hugged. They squeezed his hands a second too long. Their eyes softened when they spoke his name, and that softness made him want to pull away. Outside, the sky was painfully blue. Matthew sat in his car for several minutes before starting the engine, gripping the steering wheel as though it were the only solid thing left in his life. "Where were you?" he whispered. The words escaped before he could stop them. He waited again. Nothing answered. That night, Matthew stood in the bedroom doorway, unable to step inside. The bed was made, too neatly. He had done it himself, folding the blanket with care, as though order could replace presence. Anna's side of the bed remained untouched. The lamp beside it had not been turned on since she was gone. He crossed the room slowly and sat on the edge, his weight barely disturbing the mattress. "I prayed," he said quietly, unsure who he was speaking to. "I asked you to protect her. I asked you to be near." His voice trembled, not with tears, but with something sharper. "You didn't even warn me." The sentence lingered in the air, heavy and dangerous. Matthew pressed his hands together, not in prayer but in restraint. He had spent his entire life believing that God spoke, through scripture, through conscience, through peace that defied logic. But now there was only absence, and absence, he was beginning to understand, could wound deeper than pain. Later, he opened the drawer beneath the nightstand and removed a small notebook Anna used to keep. The pages were filled with lists, reminders, half-finished thoughts. On the last page, written in her uneven handwriting, were words she had underlined twice. "Even when I don't understand, I will trust you." Matthew closed the notebook slowly. For the first time since the funeral, his chest tightened, not with hope, with anger. He placed the notebook back in the drawer, closed it, and turned off the light. That night, Matthew Hale did not pray. And in the darkness, a question began to grow, quiet, persistent, and terrifying. What happens to a faith that is no longer spoken out loud? Morning arrived without ceremony. Matthew woke to the sound of the radiator clicking on and off, a mechanical rhythm that reminded him time was still moving, whether he consented or not. Pale light filtered through the curtains, settling on the opposite wall where a framed verse hung slightly crooked. He had not noticed it in days. "The Lord is near to the broken-hearted." He turned his face away. It was not that he disagreed. It was that the words demanded something from him, acknowledgement perhaps, or belief, and he had no strength left to offer either. He lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, cataloguing the small sensations of being alive, the dull ache behind his eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders, the quiet pressure in his chest that never fully went away. Grief had stopped announcing itself dramatically. It had become procedural. When he finally stood, he moved through the house as if navigating a museum dedicated to a life no longer in use. Every object had meaning. Every meaning carried weight. In the kitchen, the coffee machine hissed and sputtered. He poured the liquid into 2 mugs out of habit, then froze. 1 mug went untouched. He stared at it, then slid it gently toward the sink and emptied it without tasting a drop. Matthew returned to work because people expected him to. The office welcomed him with practiced sympathy, lowered voices, careful expressions, the subtle recalibration of expectations. His supervisor offered flexibility. His colleagues avoided asking questions that might require real answers. He sat at his desk and stared at his computer screen, his reflection faintly visible against the dark glass. He looked older. Not visibly, perhaps, but in a way that registered beneath the skin. Mid-morning, an email notification appeared. From Daniel Whitmore. The name tightened something in his chest. Daniel had been his closest friend once, best man at his wedding, partner in late-night theological debates, the one who had challenged his faith when it was strong and supported it when it was not. Matthew hovered over the message, then closed it without reading. He did not trust himself to respond with honesty or kindness. In the evenings, the silence pressed harder. Matthew began taking long walks after dinner, roaming the neighborhood without direction, watching lights flicker on in windows that were not his. Families gathered around tables, couples laughed on balconies. Somewhere, a radio played an old song he and Anna used to dance to in the kitchen. He stopped walking. For a moment, his breath hitched, his hands curled into fists at his sides. This wasn't supposed to be my life. The thought came with force. He had done everything right. He had believed. He had prayed. He had served. He had trusted God not as a last resort, but as a daily posture. And still, something essential had been taken. That night, Matthew sat on the living room floor, back against the couch, knees drawn to his chest. He stared at the darkened television screen, his own reflection faint and distorted. "If you're still there," he said quietly, "you could say something." His voice echoed back at him, small and unanswered. Days passed. Matthew stopped attending church altogether. No dramatic declaration. He simply did not go. On Sundays, he slept late, then wandered the house, cleaning surfaces that were already clean, organizing drawers that did not need organizing. He avoided the drawer beneath the nightstand. He avoided the bedroom. He avoided God. Yet God, it seemed, did not avoid him. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old documents, Matthew found a folded envelope tucked between tax forms and insurance papers. His name was written on it in Anna's handwriting. He stared at it for several seconds before touching it. The paper was thin, slightly worn at the edges, as though it had been handled and re-hidden more than once. Inside was a letter, not dated, not sealed, just words. Matthew, if you are reading this, it means I was afraid you might need it someday. I hope you never do, but if you do, please promise me one thing: read it slowly. His throat tightened. He lowered himself onto the floor, his back against the filing cabinet, and continued. I know you. I know how you carry the world on your shoulders and call it faith. I know how you believe God expects you to be strong all the time, but he doesn't, and neither do I. Matthew swallowed. If there ever comes a day when you feel abandoned, by me, by God, by life itself, please remember this: silence does not mean absence. And unanswered prayers are not always unanswered love. His hands began to shake. You once asked me what I would do if I ever lost my faith. I didn't answer then. The truth is, I don't think faith is something we lose. I think it's something that sometimes goes quiet until we're ready to listen again. Matthew folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. For a long time, he did not move. Something inside him shifted, not toward belief, but away from certainty. And uncertainty, he was learning, was its own kind of pain. That night, Matthew dreamed for the first time since Anna's death. He was standing in their kitchen. The clock on the wall was ticking loudly. Anna stood by the sink, her back to him. Anna, he said. She did not turn. Anna, wait. When she finally faced him, her expression was calm, not sad, not accusing. You stop talking to him, she said. Matthew opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came. He woke with a sharp inhale, his heart racing. The room was dark. The silence returned, but this time it felt different, not empty, expectant. The first thing Matthew noticed was the dust. It coated the shelves in the study like a thin grey snowfall, settling over books he once loved and notes he once trusted. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, one hand resting on the frame, uncertain why he had come there at all. The room had been Anna's idea. A place for thinking, she had called it. A place for quiet mornings and careful thoughts. Now it felt like a room abandoned by purpose. He stepped inside and ran a finger along the edge of the desk. The dust clung to his skin, stubborn and real. It reminded him of something biblical, ashes perhaps. A symbol of mourning he had once understood, but never expected to live. Matthew sat and opened a drawer at random. Inside were old sermon notes, yellowed and unevenly stacked. He lifted one, recognizing his own handwriting immediately. Confident strokes, certain conclusions. The title at the top made him exhale sharply. Trusting God when life makes sense. He laughed once, short and humorless. That's convenient, he muttered. He flipped through the pages, skimming phrases that once felt solid. God is faithful. His ways are higher. Suffering refines us. They sounded different now. Not false, just incomplete. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Matthew froze. He had grown accustomed to the house remaining undisturbed. The knock was firm, but not aggressive, followed by a pause that suggested the person on the other side was prepared to wait. He considered ignoring it. The knock came again. When he opened the door, Daniel Whitmore stood on the porch, hands in his coat pockets, eyes searching Matthew's face with careful restraint. "You look like hell," Daniel said softly. Matthew gave a faint smile. "You always had a way with words." They stood there for a moment, neither moving aside. "I emailed," Daniel added. "I know. And I wasn't ready." Daniel nodded. "I figured." After a pause, he gestured toward the inside of the house. "Can I come in?" Matthew hesitated, then stepped aside. They sat across from each other at the dining table, the same one where Matthew had closed the Bible days earlier. Daniel glanced at it, then at Matthew, but said nothing. "How are you, really?" Daniel asked. Matthew leaned back, arms crossed. Functional. That wasn't the question. Silence stretched between them. Matthew exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to answer without lying." "Then don't." Matthew stared at the wood grain on the table, tracing invisible lines with his eyes. "I feel like I did everything right," he said finally, "and it still wasn't enough." Daniel's expression softened, but he did not interrupt. "I prayed," Matthew continued. "I trusted. I believed in a God who intervenes. And now I don't know who I was praying to." There it was. The confession hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Daniel did not recoil. He did not rush to defend God. He simply nodded. "I've been there," he said. Matthew looked up sharply. "No, you haven't." Daniel accepted the words without offense. "Not the same way, but I've known silence, and I've known what it does to faith." Matthew's jaw tightened. "Then you know how infuriating it is when people say God is still good." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Do you want to believe that?" Matthew opened his mouth, then closed it. "I don't know," he admitted. Daniel's gaze did not waver. "That's an honest place to stand." Daniel left after an hour, promising nothing, demanding nothing. Before he reached the door, he turned back. "You know, Matthew, doubt isn't the opposite of faith." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "Certainty is," Daniel continued. "Faith needs room to breathe. Certainty suffocates it." After the door closed, Matthew stood alone in the hallway, replaying the words in his mind. Faith needs room to breathe. He had never thought of it that way. That night, Matthew found himself sitting on the bedroom floor, his back against the bed. The lamp was off. Moonlight spilled through the window, painting pale shapes across the wall. He folded his hands, not in prayer, not quite, but in something that resembled surrender. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore," he said into the darkness. "And I don't know if you're listening." His voice wavered. "But if you are, I need you to meet me somewhere other than certainty." The silence that followed was familiar, but this time it did not feel mocking. It felt patient. Before sleep claimed him, Matthew thought again of the letter Anna had written. Silence does not mean absence. He did not know if he believed it, but for the first time he wondered if disbelief might not be the end of the story, but the beginning of a different kind of faith. Matthew began returning to the study in the evenings. Not with intention, not with discipline. It happened the way many things did now, without announcement, without purpose, simply because his feet carried him there when the rest of the house felt too heavy. He would sit at the desk and stare at the shelves, at the spines of books he once devoured, now unreadable relics of a version of himself that felt distant. One evening, as rain traced slow lines down the window, he opened a drawer he had avoided for years. Inside were Anna's journals. They were stacked carefully, bound in soft covers, their edges worn. He had known they were there. He had simply decided, quietly, firmly, not to open them. Some things, he believed, should remain untouched. That night, his resolve weakened. He lifted the top journal and rested it on the desk. The cover was a muted blue, familiar under his fingertips. He hesitated, then opened to a random page. I smiled today when Matthew prayed. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was careful. He always wants to say the right things to God. Matthew frowned. He turned the page. Sometimes I worry that his faith is more disciplined than honest. I don't know how to tell him that God is not impressed by perfection. His chest tightened. He flipped forward, slower now. I didn't tell Matthew what the doctor said today. I don't want to worry him. But I'm afraid. And I don't know if fear makes faith weaker or more real. Matthew's breath caught. "Doctor?" His hands trembled as he turned the pages, scanning dates, fragments, prayers written in uneven ink. I asked God for healing. I also asked him for courage if healing doesn't come. I don't know which prayer scares me more. The room felt suddenly smaller. Matthew stood abruptly, pacing the length of the study. His thoughts raced, colliding with one another in painful clarity. Anna had known. She had known something serious, and she had carried it alone. He returned to the desk and continued reading, his pulse pounding in his ears. Matthew believes God answers prayer the way a loving parent responds to a child. I do too. But I'm learning that sometimes love sounds like silence. He closed the journal. Hard. The truth landed with force, not as revelation, but as accusation. She had been preparing, and he had not seen it. That night, Matthew did not sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed until dawn, the journals stacked beside him like witnesses. Guilt settled into him slowly, methodically, its weight far more precise than grief. He replayed memories he had once treasured, Anna's quiet moments, her sudden pauses, the way she sometimes watched him pray with an expression he had misread as admiration. It had not been admiration, it had been concern. "You were afraid," he whispered into the empty room, and I was too busy being certain. For the first time since her death, Matthew cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. He cried the way adults do when the truth is too heavy for sound. The next day he drove to the cemetery without planning to. The sky was overcast, the air thick with impending rain. He stood before Anna's grave, the earth still uneven, the stone newly set. "I didn't listen," he said aloud. "I didn't see you," his voice cracked. "I was so focused on trusting God that I forgot to trust you." The words spilled out now, unfiltered, raw. "I would give anything to go back, to sit with you in the fear instead of trying to fix it with scripture." The rain began then, soft at first, then steady. Matthew did not move. "I don't know how to forgive myself," he said quietly. The rain soaked through his coat, down his collar, cold against his skin. And in that moment, standing exposed, unguarded, honest, something inside him shifted. Not relief, not peace, conviction. That evening, Daniel called. Matthew answered. "I found something," Matthew said without greeting. Daniel listened as Matthew spoke, about the journals, the doctor, the truth Anna had carried alone. When he finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "That's a heavy burden," Daniel said finally. "One you were never meant to carry alone." Matthew's voice was low. "She trusted God more than I did." Daniel paused. Or maybe she trusted him differently. The words lingered. After the call ended, Matthew returned to the study and knelt beside the desk. The posture surprised him. He had not intended to pray. "I don't know what to do with this," he said softly. "I failed her." The silence responded, not with answers, but with a strange, steady presence. And for the first time, Matthew did not pull away from it. That night, as he lay in bed, a thought settled into him with quiet insistence. Faith had not abandoned him. It had been stripped of illusion. And that stripping, painful as it was, had only just begun. Matthew stopped trying to avoid the past. It did not happen all at once. There was no declaration, no decision framed as courage. It began with small concessions, leaving the bedroom door open during the day, allowing himself to linger over photographs without immediately turning them face down, rereading fragments of Anna's journals without closing them in self-defense. Grief, he discovered, did not retreat when confronted. It clarified. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old files in the garage, Matthew found a manila envelope tucked beneath paint cans and forgotten tools. The label was faded, written in his own hand. Medical. Anna. His chest tightened. He sat on the concrete floor, the cool seeping through his jeans, and opened it. Inside were copies of test results, referrals, appointment summaries. Dates leapt out at him. Weeks before the accident, months before the silence in her eyes he had misread. She had been sick longer than he knew. Not dying, perhaps, but afraid, uncertain, waiting. And she had waited alone. Matthew pressed the papers against his chest and bowed his head. The guilt that surged through him was no longer abstract. It had weight, shape, names and dates. I was there, he whispered. I was right there. And yet he had been absent in the only way that mattered. That night, Matthew did something he had not done since the funeral. He knelt, not out of obligation, not because he felt faithful, but because standing had become unbearable. I don't know how to ask you for forgiveness, he said quietly, and I don't know if I deserve it. The words felt dangerous, too honest, too raw. I preached grace, he continued. I believed in mercy, but when it comes to myself, all I feel is judgment. His hands trembled. I failed her. The silence remained, but beneath it, something stirred, not absolution, not reassurance, but clarity. Forgiveness, he realized, was not something he could receive without first admitting the full cost of what he had done. The next day, Matthew visited Anna's mother. He had avoided her since the funeral, afraid of her eyes, afraid of what she might say, or worse, what she might not. She opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across her face before settling into something gentler. Matthew, she said, you look tired. He nodded. May I come in? They sat in the living room, the air heavy with unspoken history. Family photographs lined the walls. Anna as a child, smiling wide, fearless in a way Matthew now understood had always been part of her. He clasped his hands together, searching for words that would not soften the truth. She knew, he said finally, about her health before the accident. Her mother closed her eyes briefly. Yes, she said. She told me. Matthew's breath caught. Why didn't anyone tell me? She wanted to, her mother replied gently, but she was afraid. Of what? That you would try to be strong instead of present. The words landed like a quiet verdict. I didn't listen, Matthew said. I thought faith meant fixing things, explaining them, making sense of them. Her mother reached across the table and took his hand. Anna never needed you to explain God. She needed you to sit with her in the unknown. Tears filled Matthew's eyes. I would do anything to go back. I know, she said, but forgiveness doesn't change the past. It redeems what comes after. That night, Matthew returned home and sat in the darkened living room, the journals spread out before him. I forgive you, he said aloud. The words surprised him. I forgive you for not telling me, for protecting me in the wrong way. His voice broke. And I forgive myself for failing you. The confession felt costly, like surrendering a weapon he had been using against himself. For the first time, the guilt loosened its grip, not gone, but no longer in control. Later, as Matthew lay in bed, a quiet understanding settled into him. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was choosing not to let regret be the final word. And in that choice, small and trembling as it was, grace had begun to take root. Matthew did not wake expecting anything to be different. Morning arrived as it always did now, soft, grey, unremarkable. The world had not shifted overnight. The weight in his chest had not disappeared. Yet as he stood in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, he noticed something subtle and unfamiliar. The silence no longer felt hostile. It was still present, still vast. But it no longer pressed against him like an accusation. It waited. He carried his mug to the living room and sat by the window, watching a sparrow hop along the fence outside. It paused, tilted its head, then took flight without urgency, as if the sky had never failed it before. Matthew watched longer than necessary. For reasons he could not yet name, the moment unsettled him. Later that day, he returned to church, not for worship, not for answers. He went because the doors were open. The sanctuary was empty except for the faint hum of the lights and the smell of old wood. He slipped into a back pew and sat alone, his hands resting loosely in his lap. The cross at the front seemed smaller without a congregation around it, less triumphant, more exposed. He closed his eyes. This time, he did not begin with words. He let the quiet exist. Minutes passed, or seconds. He could not tell. And then, without warning, a memory surfaced. Not of Anna's illness, not of her death, but of a day years earlier when they had stood together in this same space after a long service. "You know," Anna had whispered, "sometimes I think God speaks more in what he allows us to notice than in what he says." At the time, Matthew had smiled politely. Now the memory pressed in with weight. He opened his eyes slowly. The light from the stained glass windows shifted across the floor, casting fractured colors that moved almost imperceptibly. Nothing miraculous happened. No voice filled the room. No certainty descended. But something inside him softened. That evening, Daniel called again. "I was thinking about you," he said. Matthew hesitated, then answered honestly, "I went to church today." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "How did that feel?" "Uncomfortable," Matthew admitted, "but necessary." Daniel exhaled softly. Sometimes returning is braver than believing. They spoke about small things after that, the weather, work, an old memory that made them both laugh briefly before falling silent again. Before hanging up, Daniel said, "You don't have to rebuild everything at once." Matthew nodded, though Daniel could not see him. "I know," he said. That night, Matthew opened the Bible again. He did not search for comfort. He did not look for promises. He opened to the Gospel of John without reason and read slowly, without urgency, letting unfamiliar phrases stand out. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. He stopped. The verse did not thrill him, but it stayed. Before sleep, Matthew sat on the edge of the bed and spoke quietly into the room. "I'm still here," he said. "I don't know what that means yet." The words were not a prayer in the way he once understood prayer. They were an offering. And somewhere beneath the silence, something responded, not in sound, but in steadiness. God had not spoken. But Matthew was beginning to listen. Matthew had forgotten how much grief isolates. Not deliberately. It happened slowly, the way erosion reshapes land, imperceptible at first, then undeniable. Invitations had stopped arriving. Messages had grown shorter. People, sensing his distance, had learned to give him space, and he had accepted it too easily. It was Daniel who disrupted that pattern. "You can't keep living like a ghost," Daniel said one afternoon, standing in Matthew's doorway without waiting to be invited in. "At some point, solitude stops being healing and starts becoming a hiding place." Matthew bristled. "I didn't ask for a lecture." Daniel nodded. "I know. I'm not here to give one." They stood there, the tension between them familiar, but unresolved. "There's a support group," Daniel continued, "for people who've lost spouses. They meet on Thursdays." Matthew laughed under his breath. "I'm not ready to sit in a circle and share feelings with strangers." Daniel's expression didn't change. "You don't have to talk, you just have to show up." The words stayed with Matthew long after Daniel left. On Thursday evening, Matthew drove past the community center twice before parking. The building was modest. Brick walls, wide windows, fluorescent lights that offered no illusions of comfort. He sat in the car, hands gripping the steering wheel, debating whether to leave. "You don't belong here," a voice inside him insisted. "Your pain is too complicated, too spiritual, too messy." Another voice, quieter, steadier, countered. "Or maybe it's just human." Matthew stepped out of the car. Inside, the room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. A handful of people sat in a loose circle, their faces carrying stories Matthew did not yet know. No one rushed to greet him. No one stared. A woman near the door offered a small nod and gestured toward an empty chair. He sat. For the first half hour, Matthew said nothing. He listened. A man spoke about losing his wife to cancer after a decade-long fight. A young mother talked through tears about raising 2 children alone. Another man admitted he was angry at God and ashamed of it. Matthew's chest tightened. "I'm not alone," he realized. Not with relief, but with a strange sorrow for all of them. When the facilitator asked if anyone else wanted to share, Matthew surprised himself. "My name is Matthew," he said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "My wife died suddenly, and I don't know how to believe in a God who lets that happen." No one flinched, no one corrected him. They listened. Later, as the group dispersed, a woman approached him. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes gentle but unguarded. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "It helps the rest of us breathe." Matthew nodded, unsure how to respond. Driving home, something inside him loosened. Not the grief, but the loneliness. Weeks passed. Matthew continued attending the group, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply sitting in the shared quiet. He began meeting Daniel for coffee again. He returned calls he had once ignored. One afternoon, while helping Daniel move boxes in his garage, Matthew paused, a sudden wave of sadness catching him off guard. "She would have loved this weather," he said quietly. Daniel followed his gaze to the open door where sunlight spilled across the driveway. "Tell me about her." Matthew hesitated. Then he did. He spoke of Anna's laughter, her quiet courage, the way she believed in God without demanding explanations. He spoke until his throat ached, and when he finished, Daniel said nothing. He simply stayed. That night, Matthew knelt beside his bed, not out of habit, but out of need. "Thank you," he whispered. The words startled him. He searched his heart for what he was thanking God for. Nothing had been fixed, nothing restored. And yet, "Thank you for people," he continued, "for not letting me disappear." The prayer was unfinished, but it was real. Later, as he drifted toward sleep, Matthew understood something he had long resisted. Faith did not return in isolation. It returned through others. And that realization, gentle and unsettling, prepared him for a confrontation he could no longer avoid, the one that still waited, unresolved, in his own heart. It was addressed in careful handwriting he did not recognize, the envelope thin and unassuming, mixed in with bills and advertisements. He nearly discarded it without opening, his hand already hovering over the trash can, when something made him pause. Not intuition, weariness. He opened it at the kitchen counter, tearing the edge unevenly. "Mr. Hale, My name is Lucas Moreno. You don't know me, but your wife did. I've been debating whether to write this for months. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. I'm still not sure you should, but I believe truth, even when it hurts, is kinder than silence. Matthew felt his pulse quicken. He read on. Anna volunteered twice a week at the community clinic downtown. She asked me not to tell you, not because she didn't trust you, but because she knew how heavy the world already felt on your shoulders. I was there the afternoon she collapsed. Matthew's breath caught. She spoke your name before the paramedics arrived. Not in fear, in certainty. The letter slipped from his fingers and landed on the counter. For a long moment, Matthew stood motionless, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound anchoring him to the room. She had been living a life he did not fully know, serving quietly, carrying pain silently, loving without needing recognition. And he had been absent from that part of her world. The clinic was smaller than he expected. Paint chipped along the window frames. A handwritten sign taped to the door announced reduced hours. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Matthew stood just inside the entrance, uncertain whether he belonged there at all. Lucas Moreno emerged from a back hallway, a young man, early 20s, with tired eyes and an expression that softened when he saw Matthew. "You came," Lucas said quietly. Matthew nodded. "I needed to see where she spent her time." They walked through the clinic together. Lucas spoke in fragments, about Anna listening more than she spoke, about the way she prayed with patience only when invited, about how she believed dignity was a form of healing. "She didn't talk much about her own pain," Lucas said, "but she talked a lot about hope, not the loud kind, the kind that sits with you." Matthew stopped near a small room at the end of the hall. "This is where she collapsed," Lucas added gently. Matthew stepped inside. The room was empty now, but something lingered. Not a presence, not a vision, just the unmistakable weight of love having been spent there. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, he prayed without thinking. "Thank you," he whispered, "for who she was when I wasn't watching." The words were not polished. They were honest. Outside the clinic, Matthew sat on a bench, the letter folded in his pocket. He stared at the street as people passed, strangers carrying burdens he would never know. Lucas joined him. "She told me once," Lucas said, "that faith isn't proven by what we survive, but by what we choose to love anyway." Matthew swallowed. "She was braver than I realized." Lucas shook his head. "She was human. She was afraid. She just chose to show up anyway." That night, Matthew returned home, exhausted in a way that felt different, not drained, spent. He sat on the living room floor, back against the couch, and spoke aloud. "I don't understand everything," he said, "but I don't want to run anymore." Silence answered, but it did not feel empty. It felt like space, room enough to remain. Before bed, Matthew placed the letter beside Anna's journals. He did not feel closure. He felt commitment, to stay present, to stay open, to stay. And in that quiet resolve, something within him, fragile, imperfect, alive, began to resemble faith again. The first anniversary of Anna's death arrived without warning. Matthew had known the date, of course. He had seen it approaching on calendars and documents, had felt it lurking behind ordinary conversations. Still, when the morning came, it carried a quiet finality that surprised him. The world had not paused. Cars passed, emails arrived. The sun rose with the same indifference it always had. Matthew stood in the kitchen holding a mug that had gone cold in his hands, aware of a strange tension inside him. Not dread, not panic, but something closer to reverence. As though the day demanded more than survival. He took the Bible from the shelf, not the one he used to mark and analyze. A different one, older, softer at the edges, Anna's. He sat at the table and opened it without intention. The pages fell naturally, as if guided by long use. Ecclesiastes, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Matthew read slowly. He did not try to interpret the words. He let them stand as they were, observations, not commands. A recognition of life's unbearable honesty. For the first time, he did not feel accused by Scripture. He felt accompanied. At the cemetery, the air was still. Matthew knelt by Anna's grave and placed a single white flower at its base. He did not bring a speech. He did not rehearse his words. "I'm still learning," he said softly, "but I think I understand something now." He traced the letters of her name with his finger. "I spent so long trying to make sense of God that I missed how He was already with us. In your patience, your quiet courage, your willingness to love when answers didn't come." His voice faltered. "I don't think faith is certainty anymore. I think it's staying." He remained there for a long time, the silence no longer demanding, no longer sharp. It held him. That afternoon, Matthew went back to the clinic. Lucas greeted him with surprise, then a tentative smile. "We're short-handed today," Lucas said. "If you're just visiting..." "I'd like to help," Matthew replied, "if that's okay." It was awkward at first. Matthew fumbled with supplies, learned names slowly, listened more than he spoke. He sat with a man who had nowhere to go and a woman who had not been listened to in years. He did not preach. He did not explain suffering. He stayed. At one point, a young woman looked up at him with tired eyes and asked, "Why do you do this?" Matthew thought for a moment. "Because someone once did it for me," he said. And in that answer, he felt no pride, only gratitude. That night, Matthew returned home and knelt beside his bed. He did not beg. He did not bargain. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not letting my silence be the end of our conversation." The words settled into the room, unchallenged. Grace, he realized, did not erase loss. It redeemed what remained. Weeks later, during a quiet support group meeting, Matthew spoke again. "I used to think faith was about understanding God's decisions," he said. "Now I think it's about trusting His presence when I don't." No one interrupted. Some nodded, some cried, and Matthew felt something settle into place, not triumph, not resolution, but peace. Late that night, as he turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, Matthew paused at the doorway of the bedroom. He no longer avoided it. He no longer feared it. He whispered into the stillness, not as a man who had everything restored, but as one who had been restored enough. "I'm here." And for the first time, he knew, deeply, quietly, that God had been there all along. The house no longer felt empty. It was still quiet, profoundly so. But the silence had changed its nature. It no longer accused. It no longer echoed with what had been lost. It simply existed, like a wide field after a long storm, untouched and honest. Matthew noticed it most in the mornings. He would wake before the alarm, sunlight slipping through the curtains, and lie still for a moment, listening. Not for voices, not for signs, just for the gentle proof that he was still breathing, still present, still capable of beginning again. Grief had not left him, but it no longer ruled him. The clinic became part of his rhythm, not a replacement for faith, but an expression of it. Matthew learned the cadence of the place, the hurried footsteps, the whispered conversations, the sacred weight of ordinary suffering. He learned that most people did not need answers. They needed dignity, presence, someone willing to stay when nothing could be fixed. One afternoon, Lucas watched him sit beside an elderly man whose hands trembled uncontrollably. "You're good at this," Lucas said quietly afterward. Matthew shook his head. "No, I'm just not afraid of silence anymore." The words surprised him. and when he reflected on them later, he realized they were true. Daniel noticed the change before Matthew did. "You're different," he said one evening as they walked along the river path, autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet. Matthew considered it. "I think I stopped trying to go back." Daniel smiled faintly and started going forward. "Started staying?" Matthew replied. They walked in comfortable silence after that, the river moving steadily beside them, unhurried and unconcerned with explanation. On a cold evening near the end of the year, Matthew returned home later than usual. He turned on the lamp in the living room and paused. On the wall above the fireplace, the cross was back. He had not made a ceremony of it. He had simply taken it from the drawer one day and placed it there, not as a declaration of certainty, but as a marker of relationship resumed. Not perfected, resumed. He stood there for a long moment, then sat on the couch, the weight of the day settling into his bones. "Thank you," he said quietly. He did not specify for what. He no longer felt the need to. That night, Matthew dreamed again. He was standing in a wide, open space. The sky stretched endlessly above him. Anna stood a short distance away, not reaching for him, not turning away. She smiled, not with sadness, with peace. "You stayed," she said. Matthew woke with tears on his face and a calm in his chest he did not try to analyze. He simply accepted it. In the weeks that followed, Matthew began mentoring a young volunteer at the clinic, a quiet man carrying anger he barely acknowledged. Matthew did not rush him. He did not offer theology. He listened, and in listening, he recognized himself. Grace, he understood now, was contagious when lived honestly. On the anniversary of the day he stopped praying, Matthew knelt again beside his bed. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. "I don't understand everything," he said, "but I trust you enough to stay in the not knowing." The prayer was not dramatic. It did not need to be. It was enough. Outside, the night remained still. Inside, Matthew rested. Not because all had been restored, but because what mattered most had never been lost. Faith had not returned as certainty. Hope had not erased sorrow. Love had not demanded explanations. They had simply remained. And in that remaining, Matthew Hale discovered the quiet, enduring truth. God had never left, and neither had grace.